Pests beware, your fields have heroes. The Pests and Predators podcast is brought to you by Field Heroes and is powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Learn how beneficial insects fight pests and protect your crops. Visit fieldheroes.ca today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Tuesday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday as well. A big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Well, it is Tuesday. Hope you had yourself a great long weekend and spent some time with friends and family, or maybe finished off seeding or planting. That would be great as well. Hey, today on the program, we got Peter Whyte Johnson here with us today. We're going to talk about all things agronomy with him, get some audience questions as well about manganese. We're going to talk about residue management, tank mix considerations, a whole bunch to chat about with Wheat Pete here today. We got a product spotlight with Garth Whyte of Genesis Fertilizers. That project continues to I guess, have some progress, and they continue to look for interested capital from farmers. We're going to hear from Garth, who's a board member, former head of Fertilizer Canada as well. So he's a board member over there at Genesis. He's going to give us his perspective. And then we're also going to have a portion of a new episode of Ruminating with RealAg. Kristin Thompson from BCRC will be with us to chat about DDGs and how they are used in a feeding ration and just all the complexities around how much of an incorporation you can have, and encourage you to check out the full episode by searching Ruminating with RealAg wherever you get your podcasts, or you can find it at realagriculture.com as well. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or you can call that RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Leafs. Ugly. I don't even want to bring it up with Pete. We won't bring it up with Pete. It just nasty. I don't know what that was on Sunday. I was looking so forward to watching the game. Game 7, who doesn't like that? And Leafs played like it was a preseason game. It was heartbreaking. I haven't even talked to Kelvin Hepner about it yet. All I texted him was the Leafs laid an egg, and he just basically read it, and then he didn't want to talk about it. So maybe on Friday, but maybe by Friday, Kelvin will be healed up enough that he will want to talk about what exactly happened with the Leafs. Can't keep doing the same thing. It's, I think it's, mix it up, or not blow it up, but major change is coming there in Leafland. Of course, no hockey on Monday night kind of felt weird as well, but it's back underway here tonight. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we got Peter Whyte Johnson with us right after this. It's now time for a product spotlight, joined right now by Holly Little, Acadian Plant Health's Director of Research and Development.
As biostimulants are better understood on a technical level, they become easier and more acceptable to adopt.
We're hearing a lot more about regenerative agriculture. Where do your biostimulants at Acadian Plant Health, how do they fit into the bigger picture of soil health and sustainability as you've been discussing?
We've seen some great results when we've looked at soil health, and that's a good fit with our biostimulants in regenerative ag, because using our products can stimulate the microbiome, which results in enhanced microbial activity and abundance, in addition to the direct effects of the biostimulant on the plant. So this is really great because healthy soils support a productive crop, aid in nutrient cycling and nutrient uptake. In addition, healthier soils with a more active microbiome help the crop to resist abiotic stress. So you really get multiple modes of action, direct on the plant and through the microbiome, and different effects of those. Soil microbes and plants work together to support each other and be productive.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh!
You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. It's tagging time, and CCIA has you covered. Their online web store is your one-stop shop for approved beef cattle tags and pre-approved cervid and goat tags. Order anytime, anywhere. It's fast and reliable. Visit tags.canadaid.ca, your trusted source for traceability. Joining us here today on RealAg Radio is Peter Wheat Pete Johnson. Hey, Pete, how are we doing?
I'm doing awesome, but it's Tuesday, Shaun. It's not Agronomy Monday. It's Tuesday.
Did I say Monday?
No, you didn't.
Oh,
but
okay.
It's
I was like, okay, did I actually let that slip out? Yes, it is Tuesday. Hopefully everybody had themselves a great May long weekend, May 2-4, whatever the heck you call it. And of course, this coming weekend is Memorial Day weekend. So there's long weekends all over the place. Hey, you're in your truck right now. What are you doing today?
Yeah, so we just we're doing plot work today, and it's going to start raining tonight. So the big push is on to get things done before the rain. Looks like we're in for an extended cold, wet period, and so they're getting lots of questions about management around, do we do it? Don't we do it? How do we work around these cold? It was cold last night, Shaun. Lots of places at 0 or 1 or 2 or 3, and my good friend Nature Nut Nick said he got to minus 3.5 Celsius at ground level.
Ooh.
So yeah, I expect there's a few corn plants that got singed off, and that when you come to do weed control, if you lost 2-leaf corn, right, the corn's going to keep growing because the growing point's below ground. It's absolutely fine. But then you look at the label on that post-emergent corn herbicide, and it says 5-leaf corn, and you say, well, I only see 3 leaves. No, you lost 2 leaves, man. That's 5-leaf corn. You're at label maximum in that situation. So for growers out there that are in that situation, if you lose leaves, you still got to count those leaves when you're making those herbicide decisions.
Western Canadian prairies, bit of a cooler week. We had some real warm weather a week to 10 days ago, and we really kind of cooled off, giving ourselves a chance of some rain in some parts. Of course, it could be a lot more widespread than it has been, but look at the forecast for Calgary. We got a high of 13 on Wednesday, right? We're getting down to 2 at night, but that's not necessarily bad. But, by next weekend, we're back into the low 20s, but a bit of a cooler week here in the third week of May.
Yeah, well, same here in Ontario, man. And I think across Eastern Canada, we don't see, I looked at the forecast this morning, and forecasts can change. Okay, Shaun, let's not say this is the way it's absolutely going. But there was not a 20-degree high until the 30th of May. So that's 10 days away. You look at the Environment Canada forecast, and they have doubled down on how hot this summer is going to be. And just about everybody is saying, hey, Pete, the wheat crop's loving these temperatures, baby. And they're right. Wheat loves these temperatures. Canola loves these temperatures. They're cool season crops. And by the way, my wheat crop could use more sunshine. We're getting cool temperatures, but a lot of it is not sunny days. And to get high wheat yields, we need cool temperatures and bright sunny days. But regardless, my big fear, Shaun, is that when it changes, we'll go from below normal to above normal. And if that happens in grain fill in the wheat crop, that is never a good thing. The number one yield limiting factor on winter wheat in North America is temperature. As much as rainfall is a big limiter across all of the acres, temperature is probably number one. So I'm hopeful that we keep these cool temperatures till mid-June at least, and towards the end of June would be okay. And then it should get hot for the corn and soybean crops. But up until then, I want it cool.
Well, today in Saskatoon, high of 11. Tomorrow's a high of 10. That just seems a little cool. Like we get a little bit warmer. Yeah. I want to see a teen.
Yeah, a little bit warmer would be okay. Yeah, a teen or even 20 is okay, just not 35, okay?
Well, and it probably does slow the crop down a little bit from a growth perspective. If you're outside of Saskatoon, you've got some crop in the ground, this kind of slows things down, maybe not into in crop as quickly as maybe we thought we were going to be about a week ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it slows the crop down, and it's slowing the crop down all over the place. So my winter barley. I'm scouting winter barley to know when we are going to apply the T3 fungicide, that fusarium fungicide. And by the way, if you look south of the border, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but south of the border, the fusarium risk in the wheat crop is through the roof. The map is just solid red. So that's a bit of a concern. But regardless, that's just the way it is, right? And so we just, it's taking 10 days for that barley to fully head. And that is quite bizarre that it would take 10 days for that crop to fully head. It normally takes, 4 or 5. You see the awns, 3 days later, she's fully headed out, or 5 days later, she's fully headed out. Nope. These temperatures, super slow. I have soybeans, Shaun, that I planted on the 30th of April. It is now the 20th of May. We're still not doing plant stand counts because we're still waiting on a whole bunch more soybeans to emerge. And Horst Bonner this morning at the Exeter Agribusiness breakfast meeting said, yep, we never do plant counts in soybeans until they've been planted for 30 days because it often just takes a long time for them all to show up. So corn is slow to emerge, soybeans are slow to emerge, the cereal crops are moving slowly. But the cereal crops are still moving because we are at forage harvest on the winter triticale, the cereal rye, and that's sort of basically on par with normal.
And how's it look?
So the early yields have been excellent, but we're learning a ton yet again, or maybe it's not learning. Maybe we are relearning. If you want forage from a winter cereal crop, you have to plant early. Mm-hmm. And so the early planted stuff, the stuff that went in right after silage corn, man, it's already harvested. Some of those fields are already replanted into another crop. It's really a great way to utilize a portion of the season that we normally don't utilize. You plant that crop in late September. And normally we have nothing really using sunshine from late September till the 1st of May. That winter triticale or cereal rye crop, man, that's all the sun it uses, right? So that's really harvesting some sunshine that we normally don't harvest. That's a cool thing. That's an environmental win. And if you plant early, you let it tiller in the fall, you fertilize it well, and I mean well. We are learning that, man, early planting and high fertility makes excellent forage crops. Late planting and low fertility, and you will be disappointed with that winter cereal forage. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing more and more hybrid rye being used for forage. Talked to a lot of growers through the Farmer Rapid Fire here on the Thursday show, and just more and more acres going in. People like the volume, right? They like the volume without having to go through. Maybe they just not set up to produce corn. For whatever reason, it's kind of a nice option that provides that more tonnage than maybe necessarily a traditional spring barley crop would.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I don't know for the growers in Western Canada, whether they get a chance to grow a barley forage crop after the triticale or the hybrid rye. I'm not sure if that can work for
some
them,
oats.
But
some people put in oats.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's almost like double cropping, right? It's using sunshine we have not always used, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Hey, I mentioned in-crop spraying, and I wanted to make sure we hit on tank mix consideration. There are a lot of different options out there in terms of in-crop, especially on the cereals. But, whether it's even corn and soybeans, we got to make sure that we just do a double check to ensure that we're not necessarily putting stuff together that shouldn't be together, or residue in the tank that we're going to next to create a whole bunch of challenges, just tank mix considerations.
Yeah, absolutely, Shaun. And so one of the ones that's jumping out here in Ontario, and I expect in much of the U.S. Midwest as well, in the corn, soybean area, because now we are seeing some 2,4-D tolerant corn, some genetic trait where we can spray Enlist on corn, or Enlist is Corteva's 2,4-D, and the corn is genetically tolerant to that. And that way we can spray it on bigger corn, we can get better weed control, we can use higher rates, all of those great things. The challenge becomes that trait also means that the volunteer corn that grows up in our next soybean crop is resistant to any of the FOP chemistries. So the Assures, the Quizalofop ethyl herbicides that, like, you can spray that on that volunteer corn, it won't kill it. And so now we have to go to the group 1, or pardon me, the DIMs rather of the group 1s, as opposed to the FOPs. It's a really interesting technology, confers resistance to the FOP chemistries, not to the DIMs. They're both group 1s. So now we have to spray with either Post or Select or something like that, group 1, but a DIM. The challenge is, if I'm using that technology, and so now I want to spray my Enlist soybeans that I'm growing after my Enlist corn. Well, if I tank mix a group 1 like Select or Post with a group 4 like 2,4-D, there's huge antagonism in the tank, and the group 1 simply doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so this is one of these new things where it's going to mean a separate trip across the field to take out that volunteer corn.
Yeah, antagonism in the tank, bad. Bad.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned contamination. Every year, and I've got another one this year. I do not understand where the contamination came from. Like, it's bizarre. But yep, we took out some winter wheat with some glyphosate tank contamination. And it just comes down to when you're putting it away in the winter, you got to treat it like you're changing products. When you change products, you have to use the right tank cleaner. Herbicides are an amazing tool, but man, when things go wrong, she can cost big dollars, and that's just a bit frustrating.
Yeah, sometimes the attitude of, it'll be fine. Maybe not. Might not be.
Yeah. When the wheat dies, it's not so fine, Shaun.
Yeah.
Now, fortunately, we have time to plant soybeans there, but that's still not a good answer.
Well, Pete, also from an effectiveness standpoint, a lot of times we run into this problem too, and for a lot of products it's okay, but is that overnight? How long can something sit in the tank? Right? We got that sprayer loaded, we get going, and rain looks like it's going to happen, and those the nighttime showers, we don't have the right rain fast, so we park it in the shed. Maybe the wind comes up, right? That can happen as well. And maybe that's an issue tomorrow as well. Like, how long that stuff can sit in the tank is also something to make sure you're paying attention to, and talk to your local retailer or rep.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's how long can it sit in the tank? How water stable is it? What's the pH of your water? How much calcium is in your water? There's a whole lot of things from that perspective. But Shaun, the other really interesting thing, and I find this astounding, is that a few times we have found that if that sprayer tank sits full and it's got something in it with some surfactant in that tank mix, and there's been a product sitting on the tank walls, if it sits there for a week or 10 days, you can actually clean the tank walls just by having it sit there in the tank. And now I've got a tank contamination issue that wasn't happening before because it just didn't have the time. And somewhere in there, we didn't do the proper tank clean out, but there's all sorts of that. As much as you can, man, mix and go, load and go. Leaving it in the tank is to be avoided if at all possible.
Yeah, good point. Hey, from nutrient management to the latest weather, market, and ag trends, The Dirt, an economics podcast, is your place for farm smart topics to boost your profitability. Join Mike Howell on season 4 of The Dirt podcast, available now at nutrient-economics.com. We'll be back with more of RealAg Radio on this Tuesday with Peter E. P. Johnson right after this.
Find everything you need for outstanding weed control in your wheat and barley from the cross-spectrum herbicide experts at Corteva. Corteva is proud to offer a wide selection of cross-spectrum herbicides for maximum convenience, effective resistance management, and customized control of your toughest grassy and broadleaf weeds. No matter what kind of weed challenges you're experiencing, we've got the right fit for your farm. Visit corteva.ca to learn more.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Pest beware. Your fields have heroes. And it's not Peter Wheat Pete Johnson. The Pest and Predator podcast is brought to you by Field Heroes and is powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Learn how beneficial insects fight pests and protect your crops. Visit fieldheroes.ca. Well, Pete, do you feel like a field hero sometimes?
I love Field Heroes because I love we always only focus on the negative, Shaun, right? And those negative insect pests, they can be really, really devastating. But, I say nematodes. And as soon as I say nematodes, everybody's like, oh, my gosh, nematodes are horrible. Soybean cyst nematode causes so much loss. 90, whatever the percentage is, 98% of nematodes are actually beneficial. And so it's really cool to talk about the heroes from that perspective. And do I feel like a hero? Absolutely not. I am just a purveyor of information, Shaun. And if I can help a grower or help growers along the way, that's why I'm here. 100%.
Well, I'll tell you, on that Pest and Predator podcast, I have learned so much about the inner workings of what's happening underneath that canopy. And it's actually very cool. And it sort of reminds you when you go out there with, especially on canola, you go out there with a sweep net and you just start, you're doing your sweeps and you get a chance to gather, what's all in that canopy. And, you can see there is a lot of variety. There's things that we want to get rid of, like those, cabbage seed pod weevils or the ligas bugs, for example. Yep. There's also stuff in that canopy that's working for you, as they say, beneficial insects working for you for free, which is just cool stuff. It's pretty neat. I can see why people get into entomology.
Well, but Shaun, just on that note, and I find it's a really intriguing analogy. When it comes to those pest and predator podcasts and putting that whole system together above ground, we've gotten to have reasonably good understanding of beneficials and harmful insect pests and how that interaction happens. Man, when you go below the soil surface, all of those things still happen, but we just do not have the understanding below the soil surface because it's so much harder to see. Above ground, you can use the sweep net, you can follow things, like you can put it together. Below ground, as soon as you touch it to try to look at it, you've destroyed what's going on, right? Like it just, Anyway, just a bit of fun from that standpoint, and it is definitely an excellent podcast.
I think you got a question from a few audience members looking at manganese and the tissue test versus soil test. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So manganese is one of the nutrients that is most prone to go deficient in in wheat and soybeans, I should say, and oats as well. So that, let's say the cereal crops, not so much in corn, but soybeans, dry beans, it's one of the more common nutrients that will go deficient. It's also one of the most complex nutrients to understand in the soil. And even if you get a tissue test, And we've been looking at some tissue tests with some wheat that we're quite convinced is manganese deficient based on the field history, based on how the crop is responding. And yet we look at the tissue tests, and the tissue tests wouldn't even show us that crop was deficient in manganese. And so it really is one of those nutrients where you have to let the plant talk to you in terms of what's going on with the plant. And once you find an area that is manganese deficient, then you just have to be prepared as soon as you see that crop go off color to foliar apply some manganese. It's almost impossible to correct it in the soil. And by the way, Shaun, moisture, if it's wet, all of a sudden you don't have a manganese deficiency. If it's dry, the manganese is oxidized, it's not as available, we have manganese deficiency. If we have high pH, the manganese is not available. If we get low pH, all of a sudden the manganese is more available again, and away we go. And so there's all these different interactions. And in fact, here in Ontario, we don't just look at soil test for manganese or for zinc for that matter. We use an index where we calculate the availability of that manganese based on the pH. And so that's a little bit of a better way to look at the soil test. But even in that, there's this big gray range. Like if you're below an index of 15, you probably have manganese issues. If you're above 25, you probably don't have manganese issues. But that gray area is pretty big between an index of 15 and 25. And that just shows you how challenging it is in terms of trying to understand that nutrient. And we see more manganese deficiency on muck soils. We see more manganese deficiency on heavy clays. On the heavy clays, it's probably a root growth issue. And one of the coolest things about manganese, Shaun, is that, typically you see the poorest growth in any crop where you tramped it with the sprayer. If you're manganese deficient, it's in the sprayer track that the crop will stay green and look gorgeous, and the rest of the field will go off color and be manganese deficient. And that's because where you compacted it, you've made it more anaerobic. When it's wet, the manganese stays reduced and it's available for the plant. And it's one of the weird things from a manganese standpoint that compaction shows up as a positive, not a negative.
Interesting. Okay. What geos typically are worried about manganese deficiencies?
What geographies you mean?
Yeah.
When you say, yeah. Well, I think pretty much any of the eastern seaboard is pretty manganese deficient prone, if you will. And in anywhere where you grow soybeans, where you get higher pH, where you have high organic matter levels, you're likely to run into more manganese deficiency. We don't see it as much in Manitoba. We tend to get more iron deficiency chlorosis, I think, there than manganese, but it can happen anywhere. And it's just one of those nutrients that tends to go deficient because of how impacted it is by soil quality, or soil test parameters, I should say, not soil quality, soil test parameters, pH, organic matter, moisture. It's different than most other nutrients.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. I know something that a lot of farmers deal with across a wide variety of our listenership, and that's residue management. And of course, what we do in the fall has massive impacts here. Okay. But at the same time, those spring weather conditions can also be a factor in terms of the mess or the good situation that we're dealing with. What kind of questions are you getting from the audience?
Yeah, Shaun, so in the fall, residue is the holy grail. We want high residue because we want to protect that soil. And we want to build organic matter levels. And roots are more important than above ground residue from organic matter levels, but residue still plays. And so we want massive residue in the fall. We get to the spring, and residue is 100% the enemy. And I may have mentioned from time to time on RealAg Radio or on Wheat Pete's Word that soybeans are useless. They have no root system. They have they're just a frustrating crop from that perspective. Meanwhile, in the spring, I can't tell you, I bet you I've had at least 15 growers tell me that where they have planted into soybean residue this spring, they didn't have to do tillage. It was so much easier to no-till that the ground planted nice, whereas where they have the corn residue, where they have the cover crop residue, the ground won't dry out. It's planting like crap. And it's just, oh my gosh, we already grow too many soybeans, but because they have no residue, they're way easier to deal with in the spring, and things plant much better. And so, yeah, residue is both the holy grail and residue is the ultimate enemy. And it's a challenge to win on both fronts.
Yeah. And last year's strategy, or what really worked last year, based on some of those environmental conditions or the crops that you grew, it may not be the right one for this year, the following year. Like, this is kind of a tough one. It kind of can come and go. And, if you have no residue, then you had a problem because you had no crop. So like there's a certain level here where, we do want to have to deal with some residue.
Yeah, 100%. And the trick is managing that residue so that it doesn't have a negative impact on the next crop. So we want the residue to protect the soil. It just, now I have it in the spring. And so in my own situation, Shaun, we had the big April the 2nd, I think it was April 2nd, we got 3 inches of rain. We got all of April's rain basically on one day. And of course, everything all went with the, now we've got this massive, massive bank of, or a bathtub ring, basically, of residue, because all the residue goes out kind of like the edge of the pond of water, and it can be in some cases the stupid stuff was 3 feet deep. What do I do with 3 feet deep of corn stalk residue, Shaun? Because I don't know. Like it's a nightmare to deal with. We needed it, but yeah, how you deal with it in the spring is just more of a challenge. 100%.
Yeah. Hey, what else is on tap this week? What do you got going on?
So this week is kind of cool. We have agribusiness breakfast meetings. I have some other meetings going on, but for the most part, what we're doing this time of year is we are scouting and scouting and scouting. And because everything is slow to emerge, it's just made that whole process that much more challenging. I guess the other thing I'm doing that I'm really looking forward to, Shaun, is I'm starting to work on my presentation. I go out to Washington State to speak to the Washington Association of Wheat Growers on the 4th of June.
Oh, nice.
And I'm going to talk about the yen program. And if you can imagine, we have one wheat grower in Washington State that is part of the Great Lakes yen. And so I'm going to be talking to him this week to try to put that together with how the Great Lakes yen is helping or impacting a Washington State wheat grower. So that's going to be a ton of fun.
Oh, great stuff. That's a big wheat growing area. I'll tell you, we talked about it before, but it is an experience going through the Palouse at harvest time. Let me tell you.
100%. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, Pete, really appreciate you joining us here today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity, Shaun, even if it is Tuesday, and I hope you have yourself an awesome rest of the week.
Yeah, I always feel like these short weeks are tough. You're trying to squeeze in the holiday Monday is great, but it does create some urgency and some stress for the rest of the week trying to hit all the deadlines. Hey, maximize productivity and profitability with an innovative all-in-one approach to farming. Combining accounting, business planning, agronomic field planning, and advanced technology, M&P Ag Intellect delivers personalized solutions that empower you to make confident, data-driven decisions. Visit mmp.ca to learn more. Back with more of RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, right after this.
we have the financial tool you're looking for. A cash advance from Canadian Canola Growers Association is a financial tool for farmers that offers flexible short-term financing. Borrow your first $250,000 interest-free and the rest below prime. Put your advance to work in whatever ways make sense for your operation. Apply on over 50 commodities. Call our experienced team or visit ccga.ca. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advance Payments Program.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a product spotlight with Genesis Fertilizers. We're joined right now by one of the board of directors of Genesis. It is Garth Whyte. Garth, great to chat with you.
Good talking to you, Shaun.
Yeah, okay, so Garth, now, with over 40 years in the agri-food sector, and you've been in leadership roles, Fertilizer Canada, Restaurants Canada, and various government departments, tell us, what industry shifts stand out most to you, and how do they shape the future of fertilizer policy in Canada as you overlay that?
Well, I guess I've been in agri-food all my life. I worked with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business for 23 years, and we worked right at the farm gate. Then, of course, I worked at Restaurants Canada, and that's right at the restaurant. So from, farm gate to the plate. So I saw the whole, and then of course I was with Fertilizer Canada. The big thing is, I think Canada should be the powerhouse in agriculture. We pushed hard, the whole ag community. We should be number one in the world. We have water, we have land, we have the best farmers in the world. We're technologically up there. Everything is good, except what's holding us back, government policies. I mean, we need infrastructure. We need, how many rail strikes we have to go through, how many bottlenecks we have to go through. So there's that infrastructure. Then there's fertilizer, your input costs. And fertilizer, we have a very strong fertilizer industry, a great fertilizer industry, but demand for fertilizer is growing 2 to 4% per year. So there's going to be need for more supply.
Yep.
We're learning through COVID and now through Trump tariffs that you can't depend on other nations to get your supply.
Why are you so passionate about independent producer-led models in the supply chain like Genesis Fertilizers? Like, why? How do you see that being a benefit?
Well, first off, it grabbed me. It's so important. I think it's important to the prairie farmer. It's important for the prairies generally, and be self-sufficient and have a closed loop. So that, they're actually they're investing in something that gives them their input. It's such a beautiful model. It's farmer sustained. And also what jazzed me is that it's going to be sustainable. I mean, the last plant built, as I said, was 30 years ago. Well, this plant will be the most modern, the most environmentally sustainable plant in the world. And so it's a win-win. And I know when farmers start selling their product, the big guys the big agri-food people like a McCain's or a Maple Leaf or anybody who's using their product are looking for sustainable product. I think we can provide that.
For you, how important is it for Canada to develop its own, resilient and self-sustainable fertilizer production model? And I guess, where does Genesis fit into that?
And we learned in COVID, we couldn't even produce our own microchips to sell cars. You need to have some sort of stability in your own economy. And I think and sort of be master of your own destiny. And I think Genesis will play that role in a minor way. I mean, we've got a strong fertilizer industry, but if there's a shortage of fertilizer, where do you think it's going to go?
Yeah.
It may not go to prairies. We're, a little further away. It may go down to the States. I'd like to have our own supply. I think it's just so great to have our jobs here, to have a world-leading plant as a hub. And I think it's doable.
Well, we've been talking a lot on the show here. You're reading a lot of the trying to, create awareness for Genesis Fertilizers and its farmer-led model and solution.
Right.
From your perspective, what makes this model a game changer and makes you so excited about it?
Well, again, farmer owned, and they're also signing on to offtake. So it's a plant for them, and the profitability will go to them. So I think that's really important. So it's a surety of supply. It's having a best in class plant. We're also going to set up super centers in Alberta, different couple places in Alberta, in Manitoba, and in Saskatchewan. So there'll be a network. The location of the plant's on the Trans-Canada Highway. It's on both railways. It's got access to water, and it's right underneath the gas line. The efficiency is unbelievable. Yeah. So all these things fit nicely together.
Well, you mentioned infrastructure investment earlier. From your experience in government and national orgs, how critical is it for policy and investment to support domestic fertilizer production projects like Genesis? And what risk does Canada have? Do they face if we don't do stuff like this?
Excellent question. It's critical, and the fact is, governments have been slow to do it. I mean, they've been slow to set up. This should be a nonpartisan issue. This is a no-brainer in my estimation. And right now, we had the party at Prime Minister Carney and we had Pierre Poilievre both talking about the need to de-risk new projects because of the uncertainty with the tariffs and with Trump, and because of the China tariffs. All these different uncertainties, it's critical more than ever to help support infrastructure and help us.
We've been talking to Genesis Fertilizers board member Garth Whyte. Garth, it's been great to chat with you. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thanks so much, Shaun. It's been a pleasure.
Great stuff. And if you are interested in learning more about Genesis Fertilizers and this project, I encourage you to go to genesisfertilizers.com. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, right after this.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today. How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Join the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association at their AGM happening June 8th through the 10th in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Check out the spa. There's the snowbirds home to Moose Jaw. A bunch of history there as it relates to Al Capone. Lots of stuff to do in Moose Jaw while you're attending that AGM. Registration is now open. Visit skstockgrowers.com for more information and to register. Well, one of the podcasts that we have at realagriculture.com is called Ruminating with Real Ag, and it is hosted by Real Agriculture's Amber Bell, where she really explores some of the nooks and crannies of beef productions from a production standpoint. And the latest episode we released the end of last week was really focusing in on DDGs. What are they, their use, how they fit into a ration, all that kind of stuff. Great stuff with Kristin Thompson of the BCRC. Let's listen in on a portion of this episode of Ruminating with Real Ag.
So in essence, distillers grains are a byproduct of grain-based ethanol production. So in order to produce biofuels, cereal grains such as corn, wheat, or sorghum are heated and then fermented. The starch portion of the grain is converted into ethanol, and then that's removed and used as the biofuels. And then what you're left with is a concentrated mixture of protein, oil, minerals, and fiber. And that is what your distillers grains are. So typically you'll have two different components. You've got your distillers grains as well as thin stillage. So the distillers grains, they can be fed as wet distillers, but are more often further dried down and available as dried distillers grains, which is kind of the most common form that would be available for beef producers. The thin stillage, it can be fed as a water source in rations, but most often it is also further concentrated and dried down and then added back to the distillers grains to create dried distillers grains with solubles.
So this is basically a waste product coming from distillery processes.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
okay. Is there any use for it outside of cattle?
Good question. Typically, no. So having it being fed or available to livestock producers is, a great way to not have the level of waste that you otherwise would have.
That's great. And historically, how have distillers grains been used on Canadian cattle farms? And has that changed over time?
So the distillers grains have been used for decades on livestock operations. Historically, they were initially used more on the dairy side as a protein and energy supplement. But as the demand for biofuels increased, there increased availability of the byproduct, right? So it became more available for other livestock producers to have access to it. So then it started being used more on beef operations, particularly when you're looking at kind of the backgrounding and feedlot side, as they tend to have a higher usage volume for that ingredient, so they can use more of it.
Right, that makes sense. And so from a nutritional standpoint, we'll kind of dive into that as that's sort of your expertise there. What makes DDGs a valuable feed ingredient from the nutritional standpoint? So
distillers grains, they're a really great source of protein, a moderate source of both fiber and oil, and then they're also a really, really high source of total digestible energy or total digestible nutrients. And that comes from both the residual oil that's in that ingredient as well as the fiber level, because the fiber that's included or that's remaining within the distiller's grain is really digestible. So that increases the available energy from that ingredient. Now, one thing I will mention on it, though, is with distiller's grains, the nutritional composition can be quite variable, which producers need to understand, and that's mainly due to two reasons. One is the nutritional composition of the parent grain that was used to make the biofuels and thus their distiller's grains, as well as the processing method that is employed at the ethanol facility is going to change the composition. But overall, distiller's grains, both wet and dried, are very palatable to cattle, so they like to eat it. And it's fed often in a complete feed mills included in manufactured pellets, or it can be used as a top dress onto the base diet.
And when formulating those rations, what are some of the nutritional risks that producers should be looking out for?
So there are a few. So one of the things with distiller's grains that you need to keep in mind is that whatever was in the parent grain is going to be 3 to 4 times more concentrated within the distillers, right? Because you're taking out a portion of what was in that grain, and then you're just left with a concentrated mixture at the end. So one of the things that producers should be aware of is that phosphorus levels are typically very high in distillers. So when this ingredient is included in a ration, that ration needs to be fortified with extra calcium, and this is often in the form of limestone, because you want to keep that calcium to phosphorus ratio at the ideal 1.5 to 1 or 2 to 1. So that means 1.5 to or 2 parts calcium to 1 part phosphorus. And the calcium to phosphorus ratio is really important for a lot of body functions. And a imbalance can lead to reduced weight gain, reduced feed efficiency. It can lead to reduced milk production for your lactating cows, as lactating cows have, a 2 to 3 times increased requirement for calcium during lactation. Another thing to watch out for with phosphorus is the development of urinary calculi or kidney stones. So these can create a blockage within the urinary tract, which prevents the animal from voiding urine. So then you'll end up with what producers would typically refer to as water belly. So you'll get these steers with that kind of distended abdomen, and it can be more of an issue with steers as opposed to heifers. So you'll often see it in feedlots is where it typically shows up. Other than the high phosphorus, another thing to watch out for is sulfur. So similar to the phosphorus, the sulfur levels within distillers are also quite high and very variable. So they can range from 0.35% to 1.4%. And there are recommendations as to the limit of sulfur to include in rations for beef cattle, and that sits around 0.4%. So on a dry matter basis. So you can see if you've got distillers that have 1.4% and you're including them at a high level, it doesn't take long to get over that 0.4. And when you're balancing for sulfur within a ration, this also includes the sulfur coming from water. So water can have high sulfur levels in it, and that contributes to that overall sulfur within the ration.
Right.
One of the main issues that that will develop with sulfur toxicity is the development of polio or polioencephalomalacia in cattle. So this is a neurological disease resulting in brain damage, and it causes a number of symptoms, including, incoordination and seizures. So that's one of the main things to watch out for. So producers will want to be balancing to be below that 0.4% level within their ration for sulfur. And then ensuring that, so thiamine is kind of the treatment for polio. So hopefully producers don't get polio, but there are treatment options to try to help treat it once you do have it. And it's often isolated cases, but there have been instances where they'll have kind of a herd outbreak. If you're in a feedlot, whole pens could go down, depending. And then the last thing I guess I'll mention with nutritional factors that producers should be aware of is the oil content. So it can be variable. It can range from 3 to 11 or 14%. And again, similar to sulfur, the recommendation for maximum fat levels within rations for beef cattle is 6 to 8%. And if you do go above that, you'll often have reduced feed intake and reduced performance. You'll get diarrhea, and it just causes a lot of digestive upsets for the cattle. So again, formulating to be under that minimum or under that maximum. And again, taking into account all the ingredients that are included in that ration. You can't just include distillers up to that 8% because there's fat coming from other ingredients as well.
From a lot of other ingredients, yeah.
That was Real Agriculture's Amber Bell talking to the BCRC's Kristin Thompson. Encourage you to check out that entire episode of Ruminating with Real Ag. You can do so by finding it at realagriculture.com or wherever you get your podcasts, search Ruminating with Real Ag. Great job there. Great podcast for all of you cattle ranchers, backgrounders, stockers, as well as finishing feed yards as well. Well, if you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also, of course, call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks so much, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio. And we will, of course, chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.